All right, split screen developers, let's take a deep dive into this kind of soccer style game. Maybe you want to call it the arena, maybe you want to call it the kickoff, I don't know what you want to call it, but we're going to learn a lot more about how these features work, as well as how to edit and customize them to your heart's content. This is going to be a bunch of things all in one video, so I recommend that you kind of pause and reflect on and test out ideas as we go through, and jump back to things if you forget how they work later on. Because in this video, we're going to cover a few different features, and so pause and absorb and test out. Try not to get too overwhelmed by all the things happening at once. First thing I want to talk about is how these players work. Now, let's just get a clear sense of how this game functions. One more time, we have this ball dropping from the sky. We have players that can be controlled. They can each hit this ball and send it into a net. Once it's inside, a point is scored for whatever player scored it. And then it respawns and drops back in again. And the game continues. Now notice you are able to score on yourself. So I scored on myself, so player 2 got the point there. Then it respawns back. We're in the arena. One more thing to point out here is that there is an invisible wall behind the goal here, so you can't sneak a ball in behind. We're going to learn about how that kind of detection for the ball works, so you can customize your own net. But for now, let's learn about customizing the players. So each player has similar content tucked away, hidden underneath it. I'm just going to focus on player 1 for now because it's kind of the same thing for player 2. The first thing under each player is a camera, which shows their perspective. Now, technically, if you zoom in on the camera, you are able to actually move it around to change the position, even the rotation of how it's looking at the player. If you want to change the camera angles, for example, you're able to do so. So you can always adjust the camera's position to be able to change it, but try to make it the same for both if you do so that it's kind of fair still. But you can change the perspective differently if you like, even make it first person just by kind of moving it inside of that player. You're going to kind of get this first person perspective. There's his eyes and his face, so maybe just enough to clip through the front of that would be sufficient to have a first person experience. So something you can edit and customize if you like. The cube, this is actually just the face and the body of this character. So there's the body, and then there's left eye, right eye, and mouth. So this is actually the visual component of the player. I can actually go up in the inspector on the right hand side here and turn it off to hide this visual component. What this means is that it's very easy for you to swap out how this player looks. Let's say I add a new capsule to this game, and it kind of disappeared down below the map. I'm going to pull it up here, kind of get it positioned right where the player is. Come back here, capsule, and tuck it in right where this player is. And now what I can consider doing is actually just dropping the capsule on player 1 and hiding the previous visual. This is now going to make the capsule become, well, the new visual for this object. Let's hit run and see how this looks. This capsule is now the controlled player that's able to move around and interact with this. Notice that because it's a bit more curved, it kind of runs up on the ball a little bit. So we have to change the collider if we want it to interact with the ball a bit differently, because I think this thing is probably going to be able to kind of roll over the ball. Yeah, kind of step on top of it when it gets stuck because it's a capsule. But the idea here is that if you want to change the visual of your player, it's pretty easy. Just turn off the old one and then slot in the new visual that you want. I'm going to leave it as the old one, however, and let you play around with that as you see fit to change the visuals. The third thing here is the canvas. This is the place where the visual text gets painted on the screen when we're running it. This P1 score, that is the text attached to this individual canvas, is the top left player 1 score you see on the top left. And player 2 also has their own for player 2 score. See, if I turn this off, the player 1 score goes off. And if I turn the player 2 one off, that goes off. So these are user interface elements that control how the score is shown for each player. They keep track of their own scores here. I just wanted to show you that just so that you can kind of get an understanding of how things tucked under the hood work. But the main things that you want to be thinking about are that you have some customization you can do on these objects. For the player controllers, you're able to actually change whether it's WASD or the arrow keys that control it. So you can swap between player 1 and 2 if you'd like. You can also change the movement and rotation speeds to adjust for these characters. But I recommend if you do so, then you make it the same for both so that the game still feels fair. We also have something for keeping score, but everything's kind of already set up. This is the initial score that you start off with. And then you have your player name. You can change that. It'll change what's shown in the score. Maybe I call this my name Scott here. I think if I built things right, it should show Scott score at the top, Scott score. Yeah, there you go. So you can change the player to whatever name that you have. I'm just going to call this player 1 again for now. And then everything else updates automatically. So the players are fairly straightforward to work with. You don't want to toggle too many settings so we don't break things, but you can change the visuals and tweak the controls. This directional light that we have in the scene here, we have kind of to set the color of this area, not really, or the lighting, sorry, but what we really want to focus on here are the goals and understand how these things work. Now, the first thing I want to talk about here is the components that make the goal up. Really, a goal is just an empty object. So if I right click, I can make empty objects that are used to store other things inside of them, to be organized and to keep things packaged up. So I have a package for the goal that contains the right, the left, the top bars, and then these invisible walls. Take a look at these things. What these are basically just cubes that are made to look like walls, where I go and I turn off the renderer. The renderer is what lets us see the visuals. So when I turn that off, they're invisible. However, the collider is still there, meaning I can still run into it, making it an invisible wall. Both these walls are set up the same. The colliders are still working, but the renderers are turned off so that the player can't sneak around behind the goal and get a sneaky goal into the hit area. Because the way that the goals are processed is through this other green box we see kind of highlighted inside the net here. You see that the main goal has a box collider attached to it. This is not a collider for the post. Each of the posts have their own colliders to process bumping into them. The whole goal itself has a special collider that I'll highlight right now. You see these little green dots? They surround this collider, and it's a box in behind the net. This is the zone where goals are counted. If the ball touches this zone, it counts as a goal. So one thing you need to understand is why I stuck it a little bit back from the goalposts. Well, this is because I don't want the goal to count once the ball is just entering the net. So let me show you here. If I bring the ball over here, like so, in a real sport, the ball doesn't just touch the line to be a goal. It has to cross the line completely, technically, which means that actually maybe we want to adjust this collider even more. Because this ball's pretty big, this means that a goal is only scored really when it's kind of right about here. And that should be where the zone is. So maybe let's even adjust this to be, or actually maybe it's a little bit right about there. It seems to be about when a goal's actually scored. So if I go back to this goal, you'll see that the ball is already well into this collision zone. So what I can do is actually back this up even more. And let's just kind of get zoomed in here. So maybe like right about there is pretty much exactly right. It's not actually a goal until the ball is in this back region, meaning that this is technically not a goal yet until it's just crossed over that line. Hopefully that makes enough sense to you. But we're going to use a collider with a trigger meaning that it's not actually colliding and stopping it. It's processing an event or a trigger. It's triggering a goal to be scored. So I'm going to adjust that, and you might also want to adjust the other goals trigger zone accordingly because it's a little bit deeper in, so maybe it's a bit unfair. I'm going to leave that like as it is for now. It's up to you to decide how far deep in you want that trigger region to be, but just know you can change that and adapt it to how you see fit. I could also make these goals bigger. In fact, what if I wanted like a set of goals that were just bigger than other ones? Right now, my goal prefab is kind of small. And what if I want one that's a little bit larger? So what I might do here is actually, I'm gonna take my goal prefab and drag it into my scene to get a goal appearing, oops, here it is, over here, and maybe just to like work with it for now, I'm just gonna rotate it like this. Cool, move it over here. And how do I make like a larger goal? Well, making it larger is really simple because I just choose the basic goal and then go to my scaling tool and stretch it out. Now everything becomes larger and I can actually just move it along here. Maybe rotate it just a little bit more to be a little flush with the wall. And there we go. Everything, including the colliders, all scales. And now I have a bigger goal. I'm actually going to call this bigger goal. And what I can do with this now is drag it down into my prefabs and make an original prefab of my bigger goal. It'll load in a second. Now when I drag this in, I actually have a bigger goal that I could rotate around to 270. No, minus 270 would be the way I'm thinking of it right now. I can just manually as well. And now I can have like larger goals to be in a different spot of the arena if I want. So easy to adjust those, or you could make a goal that looks in a way that you want to, maybe with a better model. Just remember that if you make your own goal, then you have to actually attach this goalkeeping script to the goal. So let's talk about this to finish up talking about the goals now. What the goalkeeping script does is it thinks about the box collider it's attached to. So the goalkeeping script has to be on the top level. And whenever the ball enters this region, the goalkeeping script processes a goal. But we need to know who it processes the goal for. So notice this says player who scores on me, meaning that player 1's goal needs to have player 2 attached to it because player 2 is scoring on this. If it isn't attached already, let's say player 2 is not attached to this, it says none, I can just click on my player 2 and drag them into this slot. Cool. The last thing that we need to be worried about is our kickoff spot. Now, this could be showing nothing, in which case you want to press the plus to add a slot to it. And what we're doing here is adding in the kickoff spot that we have in our game. The kickoff spot is the place the ball gets sent back to after a goal. Mine's kind of high in the sky right now. I could make it kind of a bit lower so that it spawns and doesn't bounce quite so much. It's kind of up to you. But one of the cool things I've built into this game is the ability to have more than one kickoff spot. Let me show you what I mean. We're going to start with just this first kickoff spot right here. And, oh, I spawned my ball in the goal. Let's actually move the ball to where I want it to begin in this level. Let's just kind of have it maybe sitting kind of here in the middle somewhere, just for testing purposes. There it is when we start the game up, just sitting there. I'm going to go score a goal. And it goes into the net, and it's going to respawn at the kickoff spot and fall back into the world. And no matter which goal I score on, that kickoff spot is the thing that's been set for it. And so after the delay timer for the respawn, it's going to drop back in. Awesome. What I can do, however, is I've built in the functionality. If I want to make this game a little bit more interesting and a little bit more random, what if I move this kickoff spot over here, but I copied and pasted it and had a second kickoff spot that I put over on the right-hand side of the arena. What I've built into this system is that each goal can actually keep track of different kickoff spots. So let's say this player's kickoff spot will be the first one, but this goal's kickoff spot will be the second kickoff spot, a different position, so that it's not always going to the same spot depending on who scores. Maybe you want to give one player an advantage, like it spawns closer to the other player's side if they get scored on, to give them a bit more time. So this goes in there, and which one did this spawn? Oh, this one spawns over there. Okay, which means that if I score on this goal, it should spawn on the other side. So it goes in here, and this should spawn over there. Perfect. So that's pretty cool. But something else that's even cooler is I have this kickoff spot over here. What if I move this like back here, copied and pasted it, and I'm going to put this one like maybe further up over this way on this side. And then I have this kickoff spot here. Maybe I need to give these better names. I'm going to move this over here, copy and paste it, and move this other one way down over here. So I kind of have 4 corners for the ball to be dropped into. And what if I said that each of these nets, just for like one design idea, is that these goals are each able to, with a plus button, have multiple kickoff spots that they consider. So they're each going to be able to spawn to any of these 4 kickoff spots. And the way this is designed is it's going to randomly pick between them, depending on, well, just a random number rule. So I'm going to have a kickoff spot here, and then 3 more spots. Let's make sure we have different ones for each of these different spots, each of them connected. So we're doing this building and connecting ourselves. And now what this means is that when I score a goal, I have to be mindful that this ball could end up being teleported to any which corner of the map. I'm not too sure until it happens. So I'm on my toes, and there it is. I went to this corner here. Let's grab it. All right, and let's score another goal here. Sorry, it's hard to play with 2 characters, so I'm just gonna control 1 for now. And poor player 2 just gets totally pwned. Push him into the net for good measure. And where is this gonna drop in? It randomly spawned on the same one, so let's see here. Unless maybe I have to fix the script. I might need to actually fix things. Look, it's going to the first kickoff spot each time. Yeah, I think that's getting a little bit too suspiciously the same spot. So maybe I have to make a little fix in my script. Let's do one more test. If it's this one, it's definitely something wrong, and I'll fix it really quick. Oh, that was just super random 3 in a row. Now we're in a different corner, which is pretty fun. So there you go. It can spawn in different spots. So you can kind of choose as many different kickoff spots as you want. And the last thing I want to show you in this video is that I've already built in a system to have as many balls in the game at the same time as you want. They can even be of different types and shapes. So one thing I could do is use my ball prefab. I don't have it set up right now, so let's stick my ball prefab in place here. You should have one in your project already. And I can just kind of add more balls into the scene if I like. And remember, if anything I just talked about is kind of like enough info, pause and come back to this part later. But I say I have 3 balls in here. Technically, all 3 of these balls should be able to be processed properly in the game and all be able to warp to random corners. Let's just see if I can get some good kicks on here. Let's go with this side and let's go over here. So, well, that one's going to get saved, but 1 ball spawned over there. Okay, cool. And, oh, they both spawned in that same corner. And that same corner. Man, this is kind of getting a little bit suspicious. I think I might have to fix my randomizer. Your game should work a little bit more nicely. Some very suspicious stuff going on here. But yeah, the idea is you can add as many balls as you want. But what if I don't want to just use the same generic ball that was built by Mr. Rowell? What if I want to make my own? Well, you can make your own balls out of anything that you want. Let me show you really quickly how to do so. My biggest tip for you is if you want to make your own custom version of a game object, is to study a one that's working and try to mimic it other than the visual components. So let's say instead of a ball, I want to make a box that we can kick into the net. So how do I set up this box to be able to fit and function in this game properly? So what I'm going to do is just kind of set it up near the middle here. So it's kind of in the right spot. And let's look at our ball and see what's set up about this that might need to be done with the cube. And hint here, it's actually quite simple in the way I've set this up for you. The first thing to be mindful of is sometimes we need to have tags that are really important for processing logic. The most important thing for our balls is that we tag them as balls. So this cube needs to have its tag set to ball to be considered a ball and actually be processed in the scoring and the movement and stuff like that. The next thing that we need to do is make sure that we have the right components. Each of these things has a filter, a renderer, and a collider. This does as well, filter, renderer, and collider. These objects come with them automatically. But anything you import, you might have to double check that it has a collider with it to make sure that it's able to be collided with. But the last thing that we need is a rigid body. Our cube doesn't have one yet, so let's add one. You can just type in rigid body, make sure it's not the 2D, it's the regular one, attach it, and voila. Now, this should be able to be kicked into a net. Quick side note, you can actually adjust things like mass and drag to change the way that they're pushed and interacted with to make them really light or really heavy. Something to consider when you're testing ideas, but let's just see if this cube works out as expected. And I'm going to take this cube and push it along, kind of an interesting object. It doesn't roll quite as far. Push it into the net here, and I scored a point, and it's going to spawn. There we go. We've had some funny luck with it always spawning kind of in a similar position, haven't we? So now I'm going to push this over here, kind of move back, and shove it into this net. It's a goal. Player 2 scored, and it spawns over there. Randomizer. Perfect. So now we have this type of ball. We have a cube acting as a ball. You can kind of put anything in as a ball, actually, and explore and experiment with it. It feels good for the gameplay, but you can add a ton of these things, and when you're making your own maps and levels, think about like changing up how the map works. Make it a lot bigger. Add in some slopes. Add in some obstacles. Add in, I don't know, some dynamic content. Maybe you can do a bit of research or ask for support in making things turn on and off. Or maybe making things swing back and forth or move around to kind of get in the way of the player, for those who are a bit more advanced. But for now, I'll leave you with that core functionality. You're now able to create your own kind of soccer-like experience. I'm going to give you kind of some of the main building blocks in kind of about this kind of a sense here and let you add to it and customize it to make it your own. In the next video, we're going to talk about the collectible game and how to make that customized as well.